At 1447 local time, the door gunner's 50 caliber erupts. 800 meters ahead, a black drone cuts across the horizon at 150 knots, sunlight flashing on its carbon fiber wings. It jinks hard right, tracers slicing past close enough to make the air tremble. In that instant, the sky and sea become one battlefield, and the only thing standing between calm and chaos is the hand of a Marine holding steady on the trigger. This is not a story of missiles and machines alone. It is the anatomy of modern vigilance, how ordinary crews, guided by discipline and courage, turn numbers, wind, and distance into survival. When the first drone falls, 5 more appear. The Atlantic mirrors the sun like molten glass, and the men of HMLA 269 brace for what comes next. Subscribe and stay with us not just for spectacle, but for the understanding behind every decision, every breath, and every shot. Because sometimes knowledge itself is armor. The Atlantic shimmered like steel beneath them. From the cockpit of the UH-1Y Venom, the pilot's visor glowed with reflected sunlight and a single heat trace moving low across the waves. Contact. 800 meters, bearing 170. The door gunner swung his weapon into line. The heavy barrel shook, chains clattering. When he squeezed the trigger, the world became thunder. A streak of orange traces arced outward, each round punching a sonic tunnel through the humid air. The first drone twisted violently, its propellers flashing as it tried to escape. But these Marines had rehearsed this moment for months. The gunner led the target by a heartbeat, firing not where it was, but where it would be. The rounds met the drone mid-turn. A flash, a puff of smoke, and fragments of carbon fiber spiraled down like black snow. Splash 1, the co-pilot confirmed, eyes on the thermal screen. 4 more contacts dispersing east and south. Below them, the ocean was alive with motion, white trails, small wakes, an echo of something skimming the surface at 45 knots. Over the radio, another voice crackled. The AH-1Z Viper pilot. Sunrise. Descending to engage. The Venom climbed to clear the firing arc as the Viper dropped from 500 feet, banking hard. Their choreography was precise, 2 machines dancing in vertical layers of sky. Every burst, every move carried weight. A stray round could travel 3 miles before striking the sea. A mistake meant civilian casualties, headlines, inquiries. So they measured each pull of the trigger against the rhythm of their own breathing. The Atlantic stretched endlessly below, silver and merciless. Through the FLIR display, 4 new heat signatures, shimmer Jawas, warmer than the water, colder than engines. Electric propulsion, perhaps. Not toys. Not lost hobby drones. These modern military equipment, the narrator's tone would later remark, are proof that battlefields no longer need soldiers to start a war. The pilot steadied his hands. Rearm rockets. Let's finish what began at 1447. The Venom's cockpit glowed in ghostly green light. Beneath the pilot's gloves, the flight stick vibrated with the rhythm of the rotors, a reminder that even steel breathes when pushed to its limit. On the left screen, the FLIR display bloomed in shades of white and grey heat against the cold Atlantic. Junes. Thermal contact, range 900, the co-pilot murmured. FLI, or forward-looking infrared, was no ordinary camera. Worth nearly $2 million. It did not see color or shape, it saw energy. It could trace a warm bird against the night, or a drone's electric pulse hidden within sea mist. But even this modern eye had limits. When the sun hit the water at the wrong angle, the ocean became a mirror, and heat blurred into haze. The gunner had to trust instinct as much as pixels. The pilot armed a pair of APKWS rockets. Laser code 1688, he said softly, the digital signature the missile would follow. Unlike in films, the rocket did not chase a red beam. Instead, a coded flicker of invisible light marked the target, like Morse code written in brightness. The missile would read that rhythm and hone towards it. Holding that code steady was a battle in itself. The helicopter shuddered like a living creature, buffeted by crosswinds. The laser spot danced, trembling with every gust. The co-pilot exhaled slowly, lowering his pulse to calm the beam. It was a duel between motion and patience. Modern combat, he knew, was not simply firepower, it was computation and restraint. Every round, every watt of battery, every second of fuel drew from one shared reservoir. Misjudge that balance, and even victory could mean falling from the sky. As they closed to engagement range, the pilot thought of how these machines' sensors, rockets, data streams extended human reach. These modern military equipments were tools, but also reflections of the minds that created and controlled them. Precision had become survival, and in that narrow space between order and chaos, the crew of HMLA 269 prepared to strike again. In the silence between bursts, the cockpit filled with numbers. Not shouted orders, but calculations murmured like prayers. Range 900. Crosswind 18 knots. Time to target 1 second. The gunner's world narrowed to a triangle of sky, distance, and drift. The bullet leaving his barrel would take almost a heartbeat to reach the drone, yet in that heartbeat, the target would have moved 15 meters. To hit it, he must aim not at what he saw, but at where his mind believed the enemy would be. It was like trying to hit a cricket ball blindfolded, guided only by the sound of the bat meeting air. The pilot adjusted for wind hours, each gust pushing round several feet sideways before they even touched the horizon. The sun sat low over the western sea, a burning mirror that erased everything in glare. The FLIR image wavered, flickering between solid and ghost. "Contrast up, gain down," the co-pilot muttered, fighting the haze that made the ocean appear like a living sheet of glass. Fuel data blinked in the corner of the screen. 900 pounds remaining. The Venom burned 380 pounds per hour at this speed. 1 hour to bingo, he reminded himself, 60 minutes to mission's end, including reserves. Every pursuit cut into the flight home. Every minute of combat shortened the thread that led back to safety. This was the unseen arithmetic of battle, distance versus drag, time versus fuel, precision versus chaos. Even courage had an equation. Behind every trigger pull lay an invisible ledger, all mass, velocity, recoil, heat. And behind that, a single human judgment: is this shot worth it? The drone shimmered ahead, caught between glare and shadow. The pilot's thumb rested on the firing switch. Numbers and instinct aligned. For a breath, the ocean seemed to hold still. Then, calculation became action, a roar, a streak of light, and the cold mathematics of survival turned once again into flame. They were small, fast, and strangely silent RS, the kind of silence that makes even trained soldiers uneasy. Through the FLIR feed, they appeared as pale ghosts, 4 white sparks darting against a sea of grey. Their movements were too sharp, too measured to belong to hobby machines. "These are not civilian models," the co-pilot said quietly. "Patterned evasion, predictive algorithms." The word algorithms hung in the air like static. Each drone turned in perfect coordination, no lag, no hesitation. They were not waiting for a remote operator's hand, they were thinking in code, running through pre-written combat logic. The pilot knew what that meant: autonomy. Somewhere, an engineer had taught these machines to fight without listening for orders, to dodge, to scatter, to hunt. And that was what made them dangerous. As not their size, but their independence. Military intelligence would later identify them as QST-type training drones, the kind used to simulate hostile aircraft. Yet in that moment, stripped of context, they were indistinguishable from a threat born of any coastline, any ideology, any lab. Their black bodies absorbed radar pulses, their anti-reflective coatings broke laser locks. Every fragment of design whispered intent, as someone had built them to survive gunfire. The crew had faced insurgents, rockets, even sandstorms in Iraq. But this was new, invisible code replacing human cunning. It was a different kind of warfare, one fought not just in the air, but in the circuits that guided it. These modern military equipment, the narrator would later explain, blur the line between machine and soldier. They carry no fear, no fatigue, and no conscience, only the mathematics of their maker. Below, the Atlantic rolled on, vast and indifferent. The pilots tightened their harnesses. 4 drones remained, moving like wolves around a single pack. And somewhere beyond the radar horizon, whoever launched them was watching else, taking notes, calculating the next experiment. The sky had turned copper as the sun slid lower, its glare cutting across the Atlantic like a blade. Inside the venom, every vibration became a language. Rotor beat, weapon hum, the low growl of engines forced beyond comfort. Target 2 locked, the co-pilot confirmed. A laser pulse flickered, invisible to the eye, but bright as a promise on the screen. The rocket streaked outward, corkscrewing through turbulent air. 6 seconds of flight felt like 6 eternities. The helicopter's vibration threatened to shake the aim apart, but the co-pilot's hand stayed firm. The laser held, steady as breath before prayer. Then, a flash. The drone erupted, a bloom of orange against the blue. "Splash 2, he whispered. Before the echo faded, radar chirped again. New movement, high and fast. The Viper dove through the clouds, its 3-barrel M197 cannon roaring. Each burst spat a dozen 20mm shells, detonating in rhythmic thunder. The pilot's helmet display tracked the target. Wherever his gaze turned, the cannon followed. It was like painting the sky with fire. But technology had its rhythm and delay. Quarter-second lag between thought and shot meant the pilot had to look ahead of his target, to aim where the drone would be, not where it was. It demanded trust, in instinct, in training, in the feel of wind on the skin. The first burst missed. The second clipped a wing. The third found the heart. Drone 3 spun away, trailing sparks until it vanished into smoke. 2 contacts left. 2 contacts left. The fourth streaked east toward the shipping lanes. The Venom gave chase, the airframe trembling at 150 knots, close to its limits. At that speed, every rivet hummed like a warning. Fuel gauges dropped, adrenaline rose. The gunner swung the M34 minigun into place. 6 rotating barrels singing their electric prelude. When he fired, time itself seemed to stall. The tracers formed a single red beam, pure geometry in motion. The drone tried to dodge, but there is no escape from mathematics that precise. 1 burst, 1 second of light, and it ceased to exist. The ocean swallowed the wreckage. Over the comms, calm voices marked the tally: 4 down, 2 remain. And, for a moment, the horizon was quiet again. A silence made not of peace, but of calculation. Only the surface contact remained a dark speck carving a white wake across the Atlantic at 45 knots. To the naked eye, it was nothing more than motion against motion, but on the flare screen it burned like a heartbeat. Surface target confirmed, the Viper pilot said. Range 1.5 kilometers. Preparing Hellfire. The missile system armed with a faint electronic chime. The crew exchanged no words. The checklist had already been spoken 1,000 times in training. Now, it was muscle memory and mathematics. The co-pilot set the laser code PRF 1688. Each pulse was a syllable in a secret language, invisible light flickering 60,000 times a second. The Hellfire would read those flickers like tracks on an invisible rail. But the geometry had to be perfect. If the missile missed, it would keep flying for another 8 kilometers. 2 cargo ships moved in that direction. 1 Panamanian, 1 Liberian. A single error could turn victory into an international headline. The pilot adjusted their bearing, ensuring that any miss would vanish into open water. "Offset 2 degrees north," he ordered. Safe corridor established. Co-pilot steadied his hand, crosshair trembling over the target. The wind had picked up 18 knots from the northeast. He shifted the aim 500 meters ahead to account for drift. The Venom dropped a smoke marker. White tendrils stretched instantly downwind. "Laser on," he said. The tone changed, steady and sharp. The missile released with a muffled whoosh, climbing before arching into its dive. The pilot could almost feel its path, like tension drawn through the air. At half distance, the target zigzagged some last-ditch evasion code, but physics has little mercy. The hellfire struck dead center, vanishing the vessel in a bloom of orange fire and rolling black smoke. Shockwaves rippled across the sea. 646, the controller announced over encrypted comms. Weapons safe. For 12 minutes the crew had lived inside a storm of sound and numbers. Now, only silence remained, the heavy, ringing silence of completion. Above the smoke, the Viper banked westward toward the fading light, and the Marines let themselves breathe again, aware that on another day that same equation might not end so cleanly. The smoke thinned, curling upward like the final breath of a dream. Over the comms, the controller's voice returned, calm, precise, unhurried. "Exercise complete. Weapons safe." For a long moment, no one spoke. The pilot stared at the grey horizon, where war had just existed and now did not. 12 minutes of chaos dissolved into routine. The co-pilot powered down the laser, the gunner safed his weapon, and the Venom drifted in slow circles above the smoldering patch of sea. It was not combat. It was certification. HMLA 269 Alpha, the East Coast's Quick Reaction Squadron, had just passed their final qualification. The drones they destroyed were QST-35s, expensive, military-grade training platforms built to simulate real aerial and surface threats. The vessel was remote-controlled from a Navy range ship 20 miles east. Yet, none of that lessened what they had felt. The adrenaline, the heat, the calculation, all of it was real, because one day soon, the same scenario could unfold without the safety of exercise complete. In the briefing room hours later, helmets lined the table beside energy-stained flight suits. Screens replayed gun camera footage, bursts of light, crosshairs, perfect hits. The commanding officer nodded once, a small gesture that meant more than applause. Outside, the base quietened as night fell, but beyond that calm coastline, reality was already stirring. Over the winter of 2023, reports had surfaced of mysterious drones appearing off New Jersey, dozens of unidentified objects probing power infrastructure before vanishing over the Atlantic. The Coast Guard had intercepted vessels carrying launch systems, yet no one claimed responsibility. Someone, somewhere, was testing the defenses of the world's most secure nation. Mapping reactions, timing responses, learning. That was why HMLA 269 trained until their eyes ached and their fingers trembled. Because when the next contact came, it would not be a drill. And as the last video clip faded to black, a single thought lingered across the room. Readiness is not a performance, it is the quiet work done before the world begins to burn. Every generation of soldiers inherits a new kind of battlefield. For their fathers it was terrain and weather. For them it is signal and silence. The line between combat and code has almost disappeared. In the wake of the exercise, analysts at the base examined every frame of data. The lesson was not only about marksmanship or flight discipline. It was about tempo, the speed at which decisions must now be made. When targets move at 150 knots and can think for themselves, hesitation becomes the new vulnerability. These drones were only machines, but they carried an idea far larger. That power today lies not in numbers, but in networks. Whoever commands information commands survival. A single line of corrupted code could be as lethal as a missile. That is why modern defense demands more than firepower. It requires adaptability, precision, and above all, balance. The Marines had learned that courage is not pressing the trigger. It is waiting until the solution is right. One wrong shot could travel 3 miles, crossing borders, rewriting headlines. For civilians watching from shore, the story offers its own reminder. The systems guarding our coastlines are no longer walls of concrete, but webs of data, sensors, and watchful minds. Vigilance is not paranoia, it is awareness. These men flew into the horizon not for glory, but for continuity. How? To keep ordinary life unbroken while extraordinary events unfold beyond sight. Their world is measured in knots and degrees, but their purpose remains ancient. Protect, endure, return home. The next conflict may begin without warning, launched by an algorithm rather than an order. Yet as long as there are crews willing to stand in that uncertain space between technology and consequence, humanity still holds the final command. And so the lesson endures. The future of warfare is written in light and data, but its heart still beats in the chest of those who choose to serve. When the rotors finally stilled, the hangar fell silent except for the ticking of cooling engines. The air still carried the scent of salt and aviation fuel, proof that what began as mathematics in the sky had ended in human breath and effort. The footage of the exercise would circulate through briefing rooms and classrooms, analyzed frame by frame. But no datasheet could capture the weight of that silence after the last explosion faded. In those moments, every Marine understood that mastery is not in pressing buttons, but in knowing when to stop. Their military equipment stood lined and gleaming, the Venom, the Viper, the racks of guided rockets and machine guns. Tools of precision, not aggression. Each one represented years of discipline, design, and sacrifice. Without the human element, the steady hand, the trained eye, they were only shapes of metal and wire. And yet, it is through this military equipment that the will of a nation takes form. The power to defend, to deter, to hold a fragile peace in place rests on the harmony between man and machine. That harmony is not automatic, it is earned, hour by hour, in training fields and stormy skies. The final debrief spoke little of victories. Instead, it spoke of readiness, a state that must be renewed each day, because threats evolve, and so must those who guard against them. The future, uncertain as the sea, will belong to those who can think as swiftly as their machines, but remain as grounded as their purpose. As the sun dipped beyond the horizon, the squadron's insignia caught the fading light, a reminder that vigilance never truly sleeps. Their legacy is not the wreckage left behind, but the quiet certainty that when the call comes, they will rise again, armed not only with military equipment, but with judgment, restraint, and the unyielding weight of duty. Ease, freedom. Have you ever wondered what the ocean sounds like when war begins?